The Father's justice. I found it on a quiet morning. The kind of morning that feels too still, too ordinary to hold anything dangerous. The sun had just started to push through the thin Wyoming clouds. Soft light spilling across the hallway Catherine used to fuss over every spring. I was standing on an old aluminum stepladder, one hand steady against the wall, the other reaching up toward the smoke detector she had insisted we check every 6 months. No exceptions. It had been her ritual, her way of keeping us safe, even when everything else in life felt uncertain. She'd been gone 4 years now, but I never broke that routine. Some habits, you don't let it die. I twisted the cover loose, expecting the usual: a cheap plastic casing, a 9-volt battery, maybe a bit of dust. But the moment it shifted in my hand, something felt wrong. Heavier, not by much, but enough to make me pause. I frowned, holding it there above my head, feeling the weight settle into my palm like it didn't belong. A smoke detector isn't supposed to feel solid. Not like that. I brought it down slowly, carefully, like I was handling evidence instead of a household device. And that's when I saw it. Tucked beside the battery, almost perfectly hidden, was a small black cylinder, no bigger than my thumb. At first, my brain refused to process it, just stared, trying to make it something else. A sensor. Maybe. A replacement part. Anything but what it actually was. Then I noticed the hole. A tiny, cleanly drilled opening in the plastic casing, positioned with precision, angled toward the hallway outside my bedroom. And behind it, a lens. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there in the silence of my own home, holding something that had no right to exist. Someone had put it there, not recently, not carelessly. This wasn't some cheap gadget you pick up off a shelf, not something a bored kid installs for fun. The wiring was clean, the placement deliberate, the kind of work that takes planning, knowledge, money. This was professional, which meant one thing. Someone hadn't just been inside my house. They had been watching me, watching when I walked down that hallway, when I turned off the lights, when I went to bed, when I woke up in the dark and stood there, thinking about a woman who would never walk those floors again. A slow, cold feeling spread through my chest. Not fear, something sharper than that. Violation. I lowered myself off the ladder without taking my eyes off the device. Every instinct I'd built over 28 years in the FBI starting to wake up, piece by piece. This wasn't random, it wasn't harmless, and it sure as hell wasn't over. I set the smoke detector down on the kitchen table, staring at it as it might move on its own. Then I sat across from it, and for the first time in a long time, I said nothing, because whoever put that camera there was still watching. I could have ripped it out right then, crushed it in my hand, called the sheriff, ended it in a single moment of anger. That's what most people would do. But I didn't, because anger is loud, and loud destroys evidence. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at that smoke detector like it was a witness that hadn't spoken yet, and slowly, something old began to come back to me. 28 years in financial crimes, you learn one thing above everything else. The moment you show your hand, you lose the game. So I did the opposite. I stood up, walked back to the hallway, and carefully, deliberately, placed the detector exactly where it had been. Same angle, same position, no trace that it had ever been touched. Then I stepped back and let it watch me. Let them watch me. Because whoever installed that camera believed they were invisible, believed they had control, believed I had no idea. That belief was my advantage. I moved through the house like nothing had changed, poured myself coffee, turned on the radio, sat in the same chair Catherine used to sit in by the window. Normal, predictable, harmless, but inside, every sense was awake. Every detail mattered now. Every question, every glance, every moment that didn't quite fit. Because this wasn't just my home anymore. It was a scene, and I was both the target and the investigator. I started thinking the way I used to, building the framework piece by piece. Who had access? Who had time? Who had motive? No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no random vandalism. This wasn't a break-in. This was someone who belonged here. Someone who could walk through that front door without raising suspicion, without leaving a trace. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting toward the hallway, toward the camera I now knew was there, watching, always watching. And the questions settled in, heavy, unavoidable. Who are you? Not a stranger, not a coincidence. This was intentional, personal, which meant one thing I didn't want to admit. Not yet, not fully. The answer wasn't out there. It was closer, much closer. I took a slow sip of coffee, steadying my hands, forcing my breathing back into rhythm. Because if this was what I thought it was, then I wasn't dealing with a trespasser. I was dealing with someone who knew my life, my habits, my weaknesses, someone who had been studying me for a reason. And until I knew what that reason was, I would keep playing the part. The old man, alone on his ranch, unaware, unprotected. Let them think I was blind. Let them think I was slow. Let them think they were winning. Because I'd been in this position before, not in my home, but in rooms where people smiled while they stole everything. And I knew how those stories ended, not with noise, but with proof. So I said nothing, and I started watching back. It didn't happen all at once. Not in some dramatic reveal where everything suddenly made sense. It came in pieces, small, quiet moments that didn't belong, like details in a case file that refused to line up. 3 days after I found the camera, Travis stopped by. Sunday, just like always. He walked in without knocking, boots still dusty from the road, that familiar half-smile on his face like nothing in the world had changed. "Dad, you still taking those pills at night?" I looked at him. Slow, careful. "What pills?" He didn't hesitate. "The ones by your bed? Blue bottle? You said they help you sleep." There was no blue bottle. Hadn't been. Not ever. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic. Something colder. Calculation. I shrugged. Kept my voice light. Must be thinking of someone else. He laughed it off, too quickly. But his eyes lingered, watching me, measuring something. Later that afternoon, while we sat in the living room, he asked again, "Have you talked to your doctor lately? About your memory?" There it was. Another piece. Not random, not casual. Directed. I leaned back in my chair, staring past him at the window, pretending to think. "My memory's fine." He smiled. Soft. Patient. The way you talk to someone you don't quite trust to know the truth. "Of course it is, Dad, just making sure." Just making sure. That phrase stayed with me long after he left. Because it wasn't a concern. It was confirmation. And once I started looking, really looking, I couldn't stop seeing it. The questions about my will last week. What happens to the ranch when you're gone? Who's handling your accounts? Do you ever get confused with passwords? At the time, I'd brushed it off. A son thinking ahead. A son trying to help. That's what fathers tell themselves when they don't want to see what's right in front of them. But now, every question felt different. Sharper, placed. Like someone gathering pieces of a puzzle. Not for curiosity, but for control. I stood alone in the kitchen that evening, hands resting against the counter, replaying every conversation, every look, every pause. And the thought came, slow, heavy, impossible to ignore. He shouldn't know those things. Not unless he'd seen them. Not unless he'd been watching. I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing myself to breathe, to stay inside the logic, not the emotion. Because emotion clouds judgment, and judgment is all I had left. This was my son, the boy I taught to ride a horse, to fix a fence, to shake a man's hand and mean it. The one Catherine used to say had a good heart, even when life got hard. So I told myself, it's a coincidence. It has to be. But the other part of me, the part that had spent decades staring at lies across interrogation tables, didn't believe in coincidence. Not like this. Not with this many pieces lining up. I opened my eyes, staring down the empty hallway, knowing exactly where that camera sat. Silent, patient, watching. And for the first time, I let the thought finish itself. If it is him, then this isn't a suspicion anymore. This is the beginning of a case. The next morning, I drove into town. Not to the bank. Not yet. If someone were watching my house, there was no reason to assume they weren't watching everything else too. Phones, computers, patterns. I'd seen cases unravel because of one careless login, one trace left in the wrong place. So I chose the last place anyone would expect. The public library. Quiet, ordinary, forgettable. I parked a block away, walked the rest of the distance, hands in my jacket pockets, moving like just another retiree with time to spare. Inside, the air smelled like paper and dust. The soft hum of fluorescent lights above rows of computers. No one looked twice at me. Good. I sat down at a terminal in the back, took a breath, and typed in my banking credentials from memory. Catherine used to insist we keep everything written down, but I didn't need the notebook. Not for this. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching longer than it should, until finally, my account appeared, and for a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake, because the number didn't make sense. It was too low. I leaned closer, eyes narrowing, reading it again, forcing my brain to process what it was seeing. $255,000. No, that wasn't right. It couldn't be. I had just over $380,000 in that account, money built over decades, every paycheck, every saved dollar, every plan Catherine and I made for the future. I refreshed the page. Same number. I checked the account name, the routing, everything, all correct, which meant the money was gone. A slow heat rose in my chest, not panic, not fear, anger, controlled, focused, familiar. I clicked into the transaction history, scrolling back, one page, then another, and there it was, a pattern, not one large withdrawal, not something obvious, not something that would trigger alarms. Smaller amounts, $12,000, $18,500, $22,000, again and again and again, spread across months, quiet, deliberate, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for, each one labeled the same. Wire transfer, Palmer Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing to me. No memory, no business, no authorization, but the repetition, that was the tell. I leaned back slowly, fingers resting on the edge of the desk. Heart steady now, mind shifting fully into place. This wasn't random theft. This was structured. Whoever did this knew exactly how much they could take, and how to take it without being noticed. They understood thresholds, reporting triggers, timing. This was someone who had studied the system, or someone who had studied me. I opened another tab, searched the company name. Nothing. No website, no listing, no registration I could access. A ghost. The kind of entity I'd spent years uncovering. Shell companies designed to move money without leaving fingerprints. Except this time, I wasn't the agent building the case. I was the victim. I stared at the screen, letting the numbers settle, letting the truth take shape whether I wanted it to or not. $125,000. Gone. Not in one moment. Not in desperation, but piece by piece. With patience. With intent. I exhaled slowly, forcing the anger back down where it belonged, because anger leads to mistakes, and mistakes get you nothing. I logged out, wiped the browser history, stood up from the terminal like nothing had happened. Around me, people flipped pages, whispered, lived their quiet lives. Normal, unaware. I stepped outside into the cold Wyoming air, the wind cutting sharp across the street, grounding me, bringing everything into focus. Because now, this wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't just a camera, or a feeling that something was wrong. This was theft, calculated, deliberate, personal, and whoever was behind it was closer than I'd wanted to believe. Much closer. I stood there for a moment, looking out across the empty road, the weight of it settling in fully now. Then I turned, headed back to my truck, and started thinking like an investigator again. Not about what I felt, but about what I could prove. That name stayed with me all the way home. Palmer Holdings LLC. It sounded legitimate, clean, almost respectable. The kind of name designed not to raise questions, but to avoid them entirely. I'd seen it before, hundreds of times. Companies that existed only on paper, built not to do business, but to move money. I pulled into the ranch just as the wind started to pick up, dust rolling low across the fields. And for a moment, I just sat there in the truck, engine off, staring at nothing. Then I went inside, straight to the desk in my office. The same desk that the camera was pointed at. I didn't touch the computer, didn't open any files. Instead, I took out an old notepad, the kind I used to use during investigations, and wrote the name down slowly. Palmer Holdings, LLC. Then I circled it, hard, because something about it felt wrong in a way that was too precise to ignore. The pattern of the transfers, the timing, the amounts, all of it pointed to someone who understood how financial systems worked. Someone who knew how to stay just under the radar. This wasn't guesswork. This was designed. And companies like that, they don't appear out of nowhere. They're registered somewhere. So the next step was simple. Find the footprint. The following day, I made another trip into town. Different route this time. Different timing. Old habits. Never repeat a pattern if you think someone's watching. I accessed public records, business registries, anything that might give me a lead. And eventually, I found it. Palmer Holdings, LLC. Registered just 6 months ago. Wyoming filing. Minimal documentation. No operational history. No employees listed. No physical business address tied to actual activity. A shell, clean, empty, and built for one purpose: to receive money and move it somewhere else. I followed the trail as far as I could. Transaction logs, routing paths, fragments of data that most people wouldn't even notice. And there it was, the second layer. Funds leaving my account, landing in Palmer Holdings, then disappearing again. Transferred offshore, Cayman Islands, of course. Classic. From there, the money didn't sit. It didn't wait. It moved again. Back into another entity, another numbered account, buried under layers designed to make tracing it almost impossible. Almost. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, letting the structure of it settle into place. This wasn't amateur work. This wasn't desperation. This was a system, built with knowledge, with intent, with the kind of understanding you don't get from guessing. You get it from experience, or from someone who knows the law well enough to bend it, without breaking it, at least not on the surface. I thought about Travis, then about Nicole, corporate attorney. That piece clicked into place with a quiet, devastating clarity. Legal knowledge, financial pressure, access. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was a collaboration. I closed the file slowly, hands steady, mind already moving ahead, because now I knew what I was dealing with. Not just someone taking money, but someone is building a structure to take everything. And once a structure like that is in place, it doesn't stop on its own. It escalates. I looked up, eyes drifting toward the corner of the room, where I knew the camera was still watching, still recording, still feeding information to whoever sat on the other side. Let them watch. Let them think this was just another quiet day. Because now, the case had a name, and names lead to people. Once you see the structure, you can't unsee it. The money wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. I went back over every detail, every conversation, every question Travis had asked me over the past few weeks. And this time, I didn't hear them as a son speaking to his father. I heard them as preparation. Have you thought about what happens if something happens to you? Do you ever feel confused? Forget things? Maybe it's time someone helped you manage things. At the time, they sounded like concern. Now, they sounded like a script. I sat in the dim light of my living room, the quiet pressing in around me, and the realization came slowly, piece by piece. They weren't just taking money. They were building a case, not a legal case to protect me, a narrative, one where I was the problem. An aging man, living alone, confused, forgetful, unable to manage his own affairs. Once that story exists, everything else becomes easy. Power of attorney, guardianship, legal control. I'd seen it before, too many times. families turning on their own, using the system not to protect, but to take. And suddenly, every question Travis asked about my doctor, every mention of appointments, every casual suggestion about getting help, it all locked into place. They needed a signature, or the right piece of paper, or the right doctor to say the right thing. And once they had it, they wouldn't need permission anymore. They could move money, sell property, decide where I lived. All of it, completely legal. That's what made it dangerous. Not the theft, the control. I stood up slowly, walked into my office, and opened the drawer where I kept my old documents. Bank statements, insurance papers, letters. And there it was. A birthday card. Lucas's last birthday. My handwriting on the envelope. Clean. Steady. Unmistakable. I remembered that day. Travis had been there, watching. He'd offered to mail it for me. I hadn't thought twice. But now, I could see it clearly. Practice. A sample. Something to copy. Over and over. Until it was good enough to pass. I closed the drawer carefully, the weight of it settling deeper now, because if they could replicate my signature, then they could sign anything. And if they could sign anything, then they could sell everything. The ranch, the land my father left me, the land his father cleared with his own hands, gone, with ink on paper that looked like mine. I felt the anger rise again, sharper this time, harder to push down, but underneath it, something colder, understanding. This wasn't impulsive. This was layered, calculated, and it didn't stop there. That night, I got the confirmation I didn't want. Phone records, multiple calls, over weeks, to a memory care facility in Cheyenne. Not one call, not curiosity, planning. I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the lamp beside me, and for a long moment, I didn't move, because I knew exactly what that meant. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were trying to remove me, legally, permanently, get a doctor to sign off on cognitive decline, file the paperwork, move me into a facility where I couldn't object, couldn't fight, couldn't even prove what was happening. And once I was there, everything I owned, everything my family had built over 3 generations, would belong to them, clean, legal, final. I looked up slowly, eyes finding the camera hidden in the bookshelf, the small black lens staring back at me like it always had, watching, recording, waiting, and for the first time, I let the full truth settle in without resisting it. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a takeover, planned, structured, and already in motion. I leaned back in my chair, hands resting on the armrests, breathing steady, controlled, because fear is what they expected. Confusion is what they needed. But they had made one mistake. They thought I was already gone, that I wouldn't see it, wouldn't understand it, wouldn't fight it, and that mistake was about to cost them everything. I gave a small, quiet smile toward the camera. Barely visible. Go ahead, I whispered. Finish your plan, because now I knew exactly how to end it. The next move wasn't force. It was a performance. If they were building a story about me, then I would give them exactly what they wanted. Just not in the way they expected. By the time Sunday came, I had already decided who I needed to be. Not the man who noticed everything, not the man who built cases, but the version of me they were hoping for. Slow, forgetful, slipping. I opened the door when Travis knocked, a second too late. Let him see the hesitation. Dad, you okay? I blinked, like I needed a moment to recognize him. Yeah, just thinking. He stepped inside, eyes scanning me, not like a son checking on his father, but like someone confirming a theory. I moved slower than usual, just enough to be noticeable, paused in the hallway, like I forgot where I was going. Asked him the same question twice. What time did you get here again? The first time, he answered casually. The second time, something changed. A flicker, small, but real, satisfaction. We sat down for lunch, pot roast, Catherine's recipe, the same table, the same plates, everything exactly where it had always been. Except now, nothing felt the same. You been taking your meds, Dad? He asked. I looked at him, let confusion settle across my face. Meds. He leaned forward, voice softer, slower. The ones the doctor gave you, for your blood pressure. I frowned, shook my head slightly. I don't remember that. Nicole glanced up from her plate, just for a second, then back down again. They exchanged a look, quick, sharp, like two people communicating without words. That's okay, Travis said. Too quickly. Memory slips happen. It's normal. Normal. I repeated the word under my breath, like I was trying to hold on to it. Normal. He watched me closely, waiting, measuring, every pause, every hesitation. So I gave him more. I lost track of the conversation halfway through, asked about something we'd already discussed, forgot what day it was, let my hand tremble, just enough when I reached for my glass. And every time, that same reaction. Not concerned, not worry, confirmation. By the time we moved into the living room, I could feel the shift. The tension had changed. They weren't testing me anymore. They were accelerating. Dad. We've been talking, Nicole said, her tone careful. Practiced. Maybe it's time we helped you manage things a little more. Just until you're feeling like yourself again. I stared at her, like I didn't quite understand. Manage. Your bills, your accounts, appointments, Travis added, just to make things easier. Easier. I nodded slowly, like the idea was comforting. But inside, every word was being recorded, filed, used, because this wasn't a conversation. It was groundwork. They needed me to agree. Needed me to drift just far enough that taking control would look like help, not theft. I leaned back in my chair, eyes unfocused, letting the silence stretch a little too long. Then I asked, did I already pay the electricity bill this month? Travis smiled. There it was again. That look, like a man watching a door finally unlock. I'll take care of it, Dad, he said. Don't worry about it anymore. Don't worry. That's what they wanted. For me to stop thinking, to stop questioning, to let them in. Completely. I nodded. Slow. Uncertain. Playing the part all the way through, because the more convinced they were, the faster they would move. And the faster they moved, the more mistakes they would make. When they finally left, I stood alone in the quiet house, the echo of their footsteps still fading down the hallway. Then I straightened up, just a little, enough to feel like myself again. I looked toward the corner of the room, toward the camera hidden in plain sight. Still watching, still recording. And this time, I didn't hide the change. Go on, I said quietly. Believe it, because now, they weren't watching a victim anymore. They were watching a trap close around them. We moved fast, because we had to. By the time the pattern was clear, it was already in motion. I met them outside town, a diner off the highway where no one asked questions and no one stayed long. Carl was already there. Same steady posture, same eyes that missed nothing. Across from him sat Diane Fletcher. Sharp, precise, the kind of investigator who doesn't waste words. I laid everything out. The camera, the transfers, the shell company, the calls to the care facility, the forged signature. No emotion, just facts, because facts are what hold. Diane didn't interrupt, just wrote, line after line, connecting pieces in real time. Carl leaned back, listening, already thinking 3 steps ahead. This isn't just theft, Diane said finally. No, I answered. It's control. She nodded once, like that confirmed everything she needed. From there, it became methodical. We documented every camera, angles, serial numbers, placement, how long they'd likely been there. We pulled full bank records, transaction histories, timestamps that showed intent, not accident. Diane traced the money trail, account to account, layer by layer until it surfaced offshore, then back again. Clean on paper, criminal in reality. The forged documents came next. Power of attorney drafts, purchase agreements, my name signed in a hand that wasn't mine, but close enough to fool anyone who didn't look twice. We built it piece by piece, until there was no doubt left, only timing. They're accelerating, Carl said, sliding a file across the table. Doctor's appointment scheduled. Cognitive evaluation. I didn't react, but I felt it. That was the final step. Once a doctor signed off, everything shifted. Legally, irreversibly, Diane looked at me, steady. If they get that paperwork before we move, this gets complicated. I nodded. So we move first. And just like that, the decision was made. The plan came together in silence. The kind of silence that only exists when everyone in the room understands exactly what's at stake. Simultaneous entry. Morning. No warning. No time for them to adjust or destroy anything. We let them believe they were still in control, that the story was unfolding exactly the way they wanted. The next day, I went home, played my part one last time, answered calls, kept my voice slow, uncertain, exactly what they expected. And then I waited. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of stillness that makes every sound sharper. At 7:45, I saw the dust first, then the vehicles. Sheriff's cruiser, 2 FBI sedans, moving fast across the open road. Carl stepped out, gave me a look that said everything, without speaking. It's happening. I nodded once. I'm coming. The drive into town felt shorter than it was, time compressing, everything narrowing down to a single moment. We pulled up outside Travis's house, quiet neighborhood, clean lawns, the kind of place that hides things well. Officers moved in. Controlled. Precise. No noise. No hesitation. Carl knocked. Hard. Official. The door opened. Travis stood there. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then something else. Fear. An agent stepped forward, showed the warrant. Words were exchanged. I didn't hear them. Didn't need to. Because I saw it in his face. The shift. The moment the story he had built collapsed. They brought him out in cuffs, hands behind his back, eyes searching until they found me. Dad. Wait. His voice broke. Desperate now. You don't understand. I was trying to help you. You're not well. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched. Because I had heard that version already. Watched him build it. Piece by piece. And then something snapped. The mask dropped. Just like that. You stupid old man, he spat. The words sharp, ugly. Do you have any idea what you've done? There it was. Not concerned. Not confusion. Truth. Raw. Exposed. Impossible to take back. That ranch should have been mine years ago. You're sitting on everything while we get nothing. Carl stepped in, cutting it off, guiding him toward the car. Nicole came out next, shouting, furious, unraveling in a way she never had before. No control left. No image to protect, just noise. They were placed in separate vehicles, doors slammed, engines started. And just like that, it was over. Not because they stopped, but because we did. I stood there for a long moment, watching the cars pull away, the dust settling slowly behind them. No satisfaction, no relief, just clarity, because this wasn't revenge. It was a resolution, the kind you don't celebrate, the kind you survive. I turned back toward Carl, gave a small nod, and for the first time since this started, the house, the land, the silence, felt like mine again. The trial didn't take long. Cases like this rarely do, not when the evidence speaks louder than any argument ever could. I sat in the courtroom. Same posture I'd held in 100 others, except this time, I wasn't on the government's side of the table. I was the reason the case existed. Travis avoided my eyes at first, staring straight ahead, jaw tight, like he could will himself out of it. Nicole sat beside him, composed on the surface, but I could see the cracks, small movements, tension in her hands. Their attorney stood, confident, polished, delivering the version of the story they had prepared. Concern, misunderstanding, a son trying to help his aging father, a wife supporting him, financial decisions made in good faith, confusion mistaken for consent. It sounded clean, reasonable, almost convincing, until the evidence came in. Bank records, lined up transaction by transaction, dates, amounts, patterns that didn't lie. The shell company traced cleanly back to them. The cameras, documented, photographed, installed with intent. The forged documents, signatures examined, compared, dismantled, piece by piece. And then, the calls to the memory care facility. Repeated, planned, deliberate. You could feel the shift in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, understanding, settling in. This wasn't care. It was control. The defense tried to hold the line, but there was nothing left to stand on. Facts don't bend. They don't negotiate. They don't forget. When the verdict came, it wasn't a surprise. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. The judge didn't hesitate. Travis received 42 months in federal prison. No suspension, no delay. Nicole, disbarred, stripped of her license, 18 months behind bars. Their assets seized, their home sold, every dollar traced and returned. Clean, final, irreversible. Travis asked to speak to me before sentencing ended. Voice low, almost unrecognizable. I didn't answer, didn't look at him. Some things don't get explained. They get judged. And when the gavel came down, it didn't feel like victory. Just an ending. The kind that closes a door and doesn't promise it will ever open again. 6 months later, the letter arrived. No warning, no call. Just a plain envelope sitting in the mailbox at the end of the drive, like it had every right to be there. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Travis. Smaller now, tighter. Like the words themselves were trying to stay under control. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place everything had started, and read it slowly. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, I see it now. What I did, who I became. He wrote about pressure, about debt, about fear, about how it all got away from him. He said he didn't recognize himself anymore. That part, I believed, because neither did I. He asked me to visit. Just once. Said he wanted to explain, to make me understand. I folded the letter carefully, set it down in front of me, and sat there for a long time. Longer than I expected. Because forgiveness isn't a switch. It doesn't flip just because someone asks for it. And some lines, once crossed, don't disappear. They stay. Quiet. Permanent. I took out a blank piece of paper, stared at it, then wrote one sentence. The door isn't locked forever, but you have to earn your way back. No anger. No comfort. Just truth. I mailed it the next morning, and I never heard from him again. Weeks passed, then months, and life settled into something quieter, something steadier. Lucas came to visit not long after, 21 now, finishing his degree, carrying himself in a way that felt familiar, grounded, honest. We walked the fields together, the wind moving through the grass, the land stretching out the way it always had. He asked me what would happen to all of it when I was gone. I didn't hesitate. It's yours. Not directly, not yet, but protected, placed in trust, until he was ready. Because inheritance isn't about blood. It's about responsibility. He didn't say much after that, just nodded, eyes wet, and pulled me into a hug that felt real, unbroken. That was enough. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't want to admit before. Family doesn't guarantee loyalty. Love doesn't prevent betrayal. And age doesn't make you weak, unless you choose not to see what's in front of you. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't ignore it. Don't explain it away. And don't let the word family become the reason you lose everything. Because sometimes protecting your family means protecting yourself from them. I still walk the land every morning. Same path, same sky, same quiet. The cameras are gone. The accounts are secure. And the truth is exactly where it belongs. If this story stays with you, then remember one thing. Trust your instincts, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts.